We have Mike Zuzolo on our Global Ag Trade Brick by Brick episode on Connected Farmer to talk about the most recent developments on the trade war involving the one of the main BRIC countries, that is Brazil. And Mike Zuzolo is ready to assess all of that and more right here on Connected Farmer, your channel to keep you up to date with the latest trends in agriculture and livestock. So, Mike, we are back with Brick by Brick. We have had a lot of news in the meantime, in between the shows that we have recorded on here on Global Ag Trade Brick by Brick on Connected Farmer, and I think the whole tariff thing is widely reported about the 50% tariff on Brazil that is just a threat for now with 50% rate. It's widely reported that it's a very political tariff having to do with the political destiny of Bolsonaro, former President Bolsonaro, and the censorship against U.S. companies by the higher court of Brazil. But I think we can talk about that perhaps there is an extra official motive behind this tariff because the U.S. farmers are very beaten right now with low commodity prices. And wow, there are some of the products that Brazil exports to the U.S. that are widely known, such as coffee, orange juice, and cocoa, and some to some extent beef. But Brazil has had over the recent years a very substantial growth, a sustaining growth of exports to the U.S. when it comes to eggs and honey among other products. So, do you think there will be some opportunities for the US farmers, and do you think there is one of the motives behind this temporary tariff that is threatened Brazil?
Yeah, it's an extremely timely topic that we started several months ago, Luis, and I hope the viewers appreciate that this is really a real-time issue in our agriculture and our commodity trade as a whole. And I say that not to tout what you and I have been doing. It's more about we are under a very big shift in our global trading pattern. And what we see more and more, we have talked about the New East and New West between our conversations several times, and the New East trading bloc being closely defined or associated with the BRIC economies. And those geopolitical, geoeconomic uh, countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, I would probably pull out India from that right now because I think President Trump is trying to get a substantial agriculture related trade deal or agriculture intensive trade deal with India at this point. But if you look at the other three countries, we can see very clearly that, especially after the last BRIC summit a couple, 3 weekends ago, President Trump was not happy with the commentary that came out of that, not just the personal commentary about the imperialism of his presidency, but I think the specific issue of the currencies and that the BRIC economies were working aggressively towards a Russian grain exchange and working extensively towards developing a non-dollar denominated trading means or platform or uh, trading logistics in their invoicing of commodities and goods. And I think that was the root cause more than Bolsonaro. And we here in the United States feel like a lot of countries where, generally speaking, we don't like getting involved in domestic policies unless it's a human rights issue. And so President Trump speaking about Bolsonaro, I don't think that's really what this is about. I really think this is about the issue of the currencies, and that the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, and China in particular, are working very hard and diligently to segregate themselves away from a US dollar based trading system and financial global financial system. And that's why he did something very similar to what he has done to China. He threw out an enormous tariff barrier, just like he did to China a couple months ago, as a wake up call, in my opinion. It's a valid wake up call. In other words, it's a real wake up call. He's not, I don't just saying this, much like with China. He wasn't just saying this. And now, as of our taping or our recording on a Monday, on the 14th of July, we see that President Trump has announced a massive sanctions package that could be put into place on the other BRIC country, Russia, in 50 days. And it's targeting specifically crude oil. And the Senate version of the bill that we are having our Congress that is going to be responsible for the sanctions for Russia also includes agriculture. I haven't been able to find out if wheat is included, but this would be a game changer if we sanctioned Russian crude and wheat. And that's where the opportunity comes from. To get to your question, to drill down, if Brazil retaliates against the United States on the beef, then our beef prices are likely to go sharply higher. We will hurt consumption, but we will also generate a tremendous upside wave, I think, in the deferred contracts of cattle, so that beef producers here in the United States have a reason to continue to rebuild their herds for years, not just a year or two, but for years. Similarly, if we really sanction Russian oil and wheat, then many of the trading partners that have been buying wheat and oil in the Middle East and Asia would need to find another supply. And that could really help the US crude oil market, and I think the US wheat market as well. So right now, the market is not tapping into either of these two things. They've decided not to go down the path of assuming that the retaliatory tariffs by Brazil are going to happen, and they've decided not to price in any kind of Russian sanctions.
So you don't think there is any relationship to the fact that Brazil has become a major competitor to the US?
Um, I'll put it to you this way. I think the United States and the Trump administration and the people he's put in place in his trade group are much more concerned with manufacturing and bringing manufacturing jobs back to the United States. It would seem to me that the bills in both his first term of presidency, the trade deal he did phase one with China, and now the big beautiful bill passing, he can take care of the agriculture constituency with policy and domestic moves to underpin them, by bringing up reference prices, by increasing crop insurance rates, essentially by bringing the safety net underneath them up, so that the farmer doesn't have to fall as far before being caught by the safety net. And I think the Trump administration has been much more focused upon getting trade deals in agriculture. Don't get me wrong, with China, with India, Japan, and South Korea specifically. Part of the reason we haven't gotten trade deals with India and Japan and South Korea specifically has been because we haven't been able to make headway in their agriculture and for them to buy U.S. agriculture. But as far as Brazil specifically, I'm not so sure we're really targeting Brazil for the ag. I really think it's more about the idea of bringing manufacturing back here to the United States, and don't mess with the sovereignty of the U.S. dollar.
And since you mentioned wheat, Russia has zero its export taxes that they used to have, and at the same time, the Brazilian imports of U.S. wheat might be impacted if reciprocity taxes are applied in Brazil.
Yeah, I think that's all very true. And I think the way the Trump administration would look at that specific scenario is, well, you're going to probably barter or exchange goods and not settle in US dollars anyway. So we're not going to be able to be part of that. situation. We're going to be locked out of that situation. And so go ahead and do that if you want to. I am still puzzled, Luis, by the Russian wheat crop. I know USDA did increase that in their estimates on the WASDE report by 1 million metric tons or 500,000 metric tons, but they also decreased Ukraine's wheat supply and production. But with the drought issues that the Russian wheat areas had, they're saying that other areas more than offset that. However, we're just not seeing the amount of seaborne exports year to date coming out of Russia that we saw versus a year ago. So I still think there's more questions than answers when it comes to Russia's wheat crop. I think there's more questions than answers when it comes to China's wheat crop. And I've noticed also in the last couple days, last week or so since July 4th, China is under a pretty hot, dry weather pattern in some of their key production regions as well.
Well, and how do you see the commodity markets playing out? I think the markets would be really depressed, and there are all sorts of efforts around the world to increase supply right now, but the prices are still depressed, and in Brazil specifically, the farmers down there are impacted as well by much higher interest rates without much support from the government. They used to have a very good program to invest in machinery with subsidized rates, and now this year they will pay market rates that go as high as 15% a year.
Yeah, I think that the agriculture sector is universally having difficulty right now. Even the low cost producers are suffering at these prices. Our new crop corn prices, for example, in the western corn belt of Nebraska is down to about 370 a bushel. The bean price down below 950 a bushel. And so we are suffering. Brazil is suffering. Argentina is suffering. European farmers are suffering from drought. One of the things that I think is important at this stage, now that we're past July 4th, I think because the US crop has very little, if any, weather premium in it right now, we need to be on the lookout for a commodity demand low. I wrote about this right before the July 4th holiday because we had that very nice rally in the market before the holiday on expectations of an Indian trade deal and confirmation of a Vietnamese trade deal. And we also have seen, very strong usage in wheat and corn, especially. And so the market was going higher, not on weather and supply, but on demand and expectations for better trade. That all flipped upside down on its head after the July 4th holiday. And that was because of the trade deals and the lack of details of specific trade deals and some of these tariffs that we've talked about, the BRICS and the 50% Brazil tariff, the EU, Mexico, Canada tariff of 30%, so on and so forth. But notice that the WASDE report showed ending stocks for corn and wheat going down again, demand for corn, beans, and wheat globally either staying the same or going up in terms of total usage. And we still have a 10-year low in world wheat ending stocks. And in world corn ending stocks, we have the lowest since 2013. And what I'm getting at here, Louise, is I think we really are at a point, even with the trade issues and these prices that we're at right now, at a point where we could be at a commodity demand low here as we get ready for the Northern Hemisphere harvest. What's going to make that low happen or not is whether we can get a couple trade deals. And I'd really like to see an Indian trade deal because I'm very skeptical of a Chinese trade deal. And I'm very skeptical China would buy that much, even if we got a trade deal with them. And I'd love to see South Korea and Japan come together in the next month or so. But Japan has some elections this month, so we might have to wait a little bit. But an Indian trade deal, I think, would really boost the agriculture sentiment. And the funds that are so net short the corn market, I think, would feel pretty out of place at that point.
Well, and you think these complete trade deals, of course, they will come as a framework, but do you think that they will be complete, meaning that they will cover all products and for several years in the coming weeks?
I think the trade will demand it. And then what I mean by that, if there's not enough details, we've seen right after July 4th, we've seen what the trade can do in terms of punishing prices with the lack of details. And so we've got between now and August 1st. If we get some of these trade deals I just talked about, I think we could have a very strong likelihood of a commodity demand low. If we don't get those kind of trade deals, or the deals or the details, as you say, are very much lacking, that it could be really rough riding going into harvest without some weather problems. And I think that's it, I don't think we have to complicate it any more than that, because we have seen ever since February of this past year, when President Trump announced these tariffs, the trade never took him seriously. And look where we're at in price now.
Yes, and you have more bullishness on the corn side, the soybean side, or the wheat side.
I'll know clearly the corn market, because I still think USDA is too low in their consumption and demand for US corn. The feed and residual number being pulled down to make the balance sheet look less tight, that means very little, because feed and residual really isn't a true demand number. It's what's left over from the other supply demand statistics. And so it's a catch all. I'd also say with the world number at the tightest since our 2012 drought for corn, and some of these crop problems in Europe, and how sluggish the Brazilian harvest has been, and whether they can get corn out the door in the next 3 months because they're shipping so much beans out of Brazil, especially. Corn would, I think, by far be number one. I'd also be looking for a wheat seasonal low anytime here as well, now that the July futures is off the board and Northern Hemisphere wheat progress and harvest is pretty much wrapping up.
Anything else would you like to add to close?
Well, if it's a brick by brick with Luis, we've got to say something a little bit about the currencies. We've talked about the crude oil and the dollar. I still think they're excellent leading indicators. If the crude oil can go higher and the dollar remains weighted down and is not a safe haven because of something that would happen, I think that encourages more demand.
All right, I agree. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Luis.